Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Braverman,
And I'm Ellen Selm,
and welcome to our podcast, Stories from the Earth.
where we explore humankind's relationship and connection with the natural world.
We would like to take a quick moment to invite our listeners to consider supporting us through a humble little donation. If you go to our Anchor page and click on the support button, there are options to donate to $1, $5, or $10, and the donation will go towards helping us with future projects such as launching of our herbal educational curriculum. We have dubbed the People's Herb School, as well as funding to help take the show on the road and do some on site reviews and interviews at herb farms and schools and other interesting places relevant to our podcast. You can also leave us a review or a rating or both on Apple Podcasts. So that would be also very helpful.
Today we're speaking with a friend of mine, Calen Otto, who I came to know when they became the primary yoga instructor operating out of my business Middle Path Nutrition and Wellness Center. But come to find out, Calen is so much more than just a yoga instructor. They're professionally active in vegan and animal rights groups globally, and from a rather young age became a very avid world traveler, for which they run an ongoing travel blog and podcast known as the Unruly Traveler. Calen also just published their first book this last year, titled The Art of Unruly Travel on a Budget, a guide to traveling the USA on a small budget as ethically and creatively as possible. So welcome, Calen. And to start things off, I want to say that I wish that I had had your book to read before my husband and I did our 9-month road trip around the country on a fixed budget back in 2011. Even just some of the pre-trip thought-provoking questions that you propose in your book, such as like the whys of why one even wants to travel in the first place, would have been so helpful in directing the trip in an intentional way, which I think would have reduced some of the stresses. And I really respect that you're also very mindful in your writing to acknowledge your privilege and mention how others' lived experiences and opportunities may be different, but that you still work at making your travel tips very accessible and inspirational for everyone. And that way, even though someone who's starting maybe from a different set of resources and connections than you have doesn't need to assume somehow that their ability to travel is out of reach. And the travel mantra that you came up with stands out. The one you wrote that said, I don't shrink my desires to please the general society. The world is evolving to learn how to care for and embrace me. So, on those notes, you tell the story behind the chosen name of Unruly Traveler. I mean, what makes an unruly traveler? Why are you one?
Thank you, Ellen. That was like the best introduction ever, actually. I was like, wow, that's me. I did that. So thank you. That was so good. And also when you read that statement, I was like, wow, that was really good. And I kind of forgot I wrote that for a second. But you kind of hit it on the head there, like in the question of asking what makes an unruly traveler, because, we're each so different and so unique. And I think some of the ways that I'm different is not like living a typical lifestyle, right? Like I live off grid, I'm vegan, an animal rights activist, very creative in my activism. Like I do lots of different things that normal people just don't do on the everyday basis. I don't necessarily respect or follow all laws or rules if I don't think that they are ethical or fair. So that's what I think makes adds the unruly part, right? And then if you're traveling on a budget, you have to be creative, you have to be frugal but creative at the same time. So I think that's where the unruliness comes in, right? Because you're not just doing exactly what everyone else is doing and you're not just following all of the norms. Because I think if you, for example, for travel, if you tried to travel just from what you saw on the internet or you heard from people, you wouldn't even know that there's all these different budget options and you wouldn't even know that it's accessible to more people. So I guess that's where the unruly came in. I used to have the Wander Woman blog, but then I'm like, I need something more descriptive because this is travel, but it's not your typical, we're going to go on a cruise, we're going to go to a resort type of travel. It's like off the beaten path, but also not following the rules. So that's kind of where that came from.
And for everybody, not just women.
Yeah, exactly. And it's for
Got a
everyone.
broader name there.
Yes. Yeah. It really opened it up.
And I like the unruly part. It just is like very I don't know, there's this rebellious spark to it. You're like,
Get pumped up. Yeah. I'm gonna
Yeah.
travel.
Exactly. And,
Exactly.
you know, a lot of us live kind of like, you know, kind of a, you know, we do the same thing every day. And it's kind of nice to think about doing different things and in a different way.
Yeah, I really like the band The Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks. And there's a song, the song Cowboy Take Me Away. They're talking, I always think of the earth at this part because they're saying they want to grow something wild and unruly. And since I was a kid, like, I don't know, all these like plants, you know, with different kind of maybe pokes or like wild vines or something always came into my head. And so when I was looking for a new name for the blog, that image of those plants with all the different shapes and sizes popped into my head. And I was like, unruly. I like that. So thanks to the country band for the inspiration.
Yeah.
Thanks to nature.
Yeah, thanks to nature.
All that
Exactly.
biodiversity.
Yeah.
Were you raised in a family that traveled a lot?
No, not at all, actually. My parents, my dad had traveled a little bit for the military, and I think my mom had maybe gone to Europe once. But the only travel I really knew was like family road trips to Florida or Virginia Beach, you know, like the typical, we lived in Ohio, so we would do the 18-hour drive, and that was really all I knew about travel. You know, when I was an exchange student after I graduated high school, I went back to high school. And I was out of the country for a year, living with a host family, and that was my first experience out of the country ever, and my first solo like travel experience. So my parents encouraged me to do it, but they didn't travel much, and we didn't travel much as a family. So think I just got really lucky that they were so encouraging.
More fish out of water because he didn't have a reference point necessarily. It was just like jump in, see what happens.
Yeah, and had I had known how hard it would be, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Like, had I had known more about travel, I think maybe it was good that I didn't really know and that I just took that leap because it was really challenging and it taught me a lot, but it would have been really intimidating had I known what it was going to be like.
At just 19 years old, you planned and set out for a cross-country solo bike ride. So I guess to get the chronology right, because I wasn't sure, was that after your exchange program experience out of the country or before?
That was afterwards. That was actually not long after I came back from being out of the country that happened because a weird long story short, when I was in Chile, my host family really didn't want me to leave the house by myself that much, like being a female, being from out of the country. And I actually would go on runs by myself a lot, and I broke my foot one day running, and I didn't realize it. I just was like, wow, something's wrong. I didn't tell them because I didn't want them to like strip me of that freedom. And so when I came, I just kept walking, like trying to walk on my foot and ignore it. And when I came back to the USA, I had done a yoga teacher training like soon after I got back. And then I started teaching yoga, and that was my income. But then I had to go back to the doctor because I was having foot problems, and they put me in a walking cast. And so that's why I kind of started this thing like where I was out of money because I didn't really know about online work at the time. And I was in a walking cast and I wasn't teaching yoga anymore like I was. You know, so I was at my parents' house just like looking on the computer like I just spent this year abroad doing the most exciting things in the world, and now I'm just sitting in their computer room with this thing on my foot, you know? So I had a lot of time to stew and be like, I really need to get out of here. So that's how that's kind of connected right there.
So it's kind of what part of what inspired you to head out and do that. How much money did you set out with for that excursion, and how did your family react to your plans to go do it?
Well, so at first I just got the travel bug while I was at home. Like you start to get antsy and you're like, I want to go. And then I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? Because I don't have any money. And I actually went to this like gentle yoga weekend where I could just do like gentle movements and stuff. And they were doing a circle afterwards where they were talking about, their dreams and goals and all those things. And I was like, I want to travel, but I don't know how. Like, I literally don't know how I would make it happen right now. And someone just said, I heard that there's this woman who travels with no money and she just works for things as she goes, and she'll do talks and people will pay for her bus tickets. And I never looked her up. I was just like, I guess if she could do that, I could try to do that. And then I was just thinking, how can I get around? I don't want to walk. I still had the boot on, and I was thinking like it's going to be really hard to just start walking normally after this. So I was like, I guess bike is the next best thing. And I started doing research online. And there's a food activist called Rob Greenfield. I don't know if y'all have heard of him before, but he did a lot of biking and traveling with no money. So I kind of learned some stuff online before I went. So first it was like, okay, I have the travel bug, I need to go, and I'm broke. And then it was like, I don't know, I started getting really depressed because I was at that age where I was kind of learning about the world and just all the injustices and all the terrible things that happen and that we do to each other. And I was like, you know what? I just want to see like if there's good people out there still. Like if I can do this, if I could make it across the country and I could meet people and I could talk to people and just kind of figure out how the world works. Like, are there good people still? What's going on? I decided I would do it with no money because I didn't have any money. I ended up starting out with a $300 gift card because my mother was like really worried and she made me take it for emergencies. Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it. I ended up spending that gift card when I crashed my bike and to get my bike repaired. So really, I started out with that gift card, which was used, and then just my bike and just working for things as I went. And your other question, Ellen, my parents were actually pretty supportive about it. My dad was actually really worried. He was the one who kept like protesting, like, go with a group, do it this way, do it that way. And my mom was like, no, you need to stick to your plan. That's what you wanted to do. That's what you should do. But she just told me actually this month that when I sat her down, both my parents down to tell them about my plan, they thought that I was going to tell them that I was going to go to college finally. And instead, I told them I was going to bike across the country with no money. So they were a little bit surprised, I think.
Was the biking trip your first big travel adventure, or did you have another one that was your first?
The year abroad was my biggest adventure, but I had never had a biking adventure. Like I had never biked more than maybe 12 miles before I came up with this plan. And then after I came up with the plan and my foot healed and I could finally practice, I never biked more than 20 miles because I was just like, this is hard work. I'll just do it when I get there. So I was really unprepared.
Did you, when you had your exchange student adventure, did you pick out your country you were going to, or could you just talk some more about that?
Yeah, so for that process, it depends on who you go through. And I went through Rotary at the time. But you pick 3 countries that you would like to go to. And you don't always get to be an exchange student. You have to apply, right? And then you have to apply to those countries. So it's kind of a long process of seeing, can you even do it? And then can you get into the country you want to go to? I think I put Argentina as my first, Chile as my second, maybe Brazil as my third. And I ended up going to Chile. But I literally was so unaware of the rest of the world that I had no idea what these countries were like. I didn't even know where they were on a map, to be honest. I was like very uneducated. So I really learned about the country once I got there, which is embarrassing. But I see like a lot of people in the US, we just don't know a lot about the rest of the world and we're not taught it in school. So I was just like, well, this sounds like a cool place. And I'm glad that I got to go where I went, but I really had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, I was very fortunate in high school to get to go on like a class trip to Europe. Yeah, we were like, it was like, I don't know, 10 of us and like some chaperones, some adults.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 days in London and 2 days in like Germany and 2 days in Switzerland, but I was really thankful that my parents were able to send me on that trip because I got to see Europe. I got to see another part of the world, and you really do get an idea, even though you're there for such a short time. You were there longer, so which was great. You got
immersed.
Yes, more immersed.
Very immersed.
But still felt like I learned a lot, and I still feel like I dropped from that experience.
Yeah, I feel like if you're even if you're in the States, you go to a new state, you usually learn something. But in a new country, it's like learning is amplified and it's sped up. And so even if you spend a week abroad, I feel like you learn more than maybe you do a year when you're at home. So I'm sure you experienced that like first time going to other countries too.
Yeah, and I thought I would have a hard time with the money, like the exchange rate, because we were going through different currency like every 2 days, but that was
Hmm.
actually easy. So
Yeah, yeah, it'll surprise you what's actually easy and what's hard when you actually go to do it.
So, Calen, what are some things that you do to help you stay calm and centered and patient and confident while you're traveling? I mean, especially since your first experience was sort of a fly by the seat of your pants experience, I'm sure you developed on the fly a lot of good coping strategies.
Yeah, I really had to because first of all, biking like anywhere from 35 to 70 miles a day when you're not used to it, when you're young, when you know, you have some travel experience but not a lot is very nerve-wracking, especially how I was doing it. Like I would throw up a tent every night and just see where I landed. Like I didn't have it planned out, oh, I'll be here tonight and there tomorrow and I know where I'm going to stay. It was like however far I can get today, that's where I get and then I have to figure it out. I do remember one specific moment when the route that I was going to bike was like messed up somehow. And you're not supposed to bike on highways, but I was with a group of bikers that I had just met and they let me join them and they diverted us to like a highway that was shut down on one side but still going on the other. And semi trucks were flying past us. And my whole bike was shaking. And I was terrified. Honestly, I thought I was going to just like if they made one wrong move or if the air pushed me too hard, like I was done. And I remember I listened to Will Tuttle. He's like also a vegan activist. He's a hippie. He was one of the first founders or was one of the first people at the farm in Tennessee.
Huh.
He has all these meditations that you can just listen to. And so I had those meditations and I was like uber focused on them. Like I was like repeating what he said. I was like so focused on that because I had to hold on to something besides like everything that was going on around me. So I think that mantras really helped me a lot, and that's why I included them in the book because for me, I need to divert my brain somewhere else and say what I want to happen instead of what's actually happening. If it's a scenario that you're not particularly excited to be in, like I need to focus, like, okay, this could change or this is what I want it to be. Even now, like when I travel abroad and have hard times, sitting with mantras or in meditation or just sinking my hands or feet into the earth and stretching my body is like huge for me. Like if I'm so frazzled and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a really hard time, or we're just moving so fast through different countries, or bad things are happening, just to be able to sit outside with myself, move my body a little bit, and give my brain something intentional to focus on is really good for me to calm down.
I like that you included those mantras in the book. Yeah, they're really good. I found throughout my life that there are really good things to hold on to.
Well, and your examples that you gave too of the ones you had come up with were nicely practical, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes people hear the word mantra and they think you're either going to be like, humming something in Sanskrit where you don't really know what you're saying, but you heard it was a good thing to do, or you're like getting really flowery about it, and you have to like. And some people, that's just you're just not going to connect with that. So like the stuff that you put down, it's like, no, this is very appropriate for me in the scenario, matter of fact, but also broadly applicable enough that it's worth sharing in a book because other people could see the relevance and find ways to apply it in their own scenario and make it a helpful thing. So it's a really good balance.
Yeah, thank you. I was worried when I put the mantras in there because, like you said, people hear mantra and they get like, oh my gosh, that's so hippy dippy, overwhelming. I can't do it. Or you have to do it in Sanskrit. Like, I've never been able to, I can get into that when I listen to someone else do it, but I've never been one to like memorize it and all of those things. Like, I just need something tangible that is not what's happening, but I can see it. And I'm just trying to pull it into my reality. So I want them to be very practical, so people aren't thinking, oh, this will never happen, right? Like if you miss your bus and then your mantra is, I find my way there safely and in good time. Right, because like then you're
Yeah.
like looking for something else. You're open to whatever else is coming. It's not like I magically get there and on a flying unicorn or something. No, it's like this is how it's gonna happen. It's gonna be okay.
What are some other countries you've visited now since that first big cross-country trip years ago?
So the cross country trip happened, and then I've been to around 20 countries now. I just did the last three recently because I just got back from Guatemala, Mexico, and I only went to El Salvador for a few days. But I actually made a lot of friends from Europe when I was an exchange student because they were exchange students at the same time. So after I think my first big travel kind of other trip after my bike trip was going to Finland, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, places like that to visit my friends. But my favorite parts of the world, I think, are South America, Central America. Like I love Bolivia and Peru, and I'm like obsessed with Guatemala now. I think those places are more my speed, and I also got to visit Rwanda and Uganda, and I really, really liked that as well.
I haven't been to that part of the world yet.
Yeah, every place is just so different. And I've always wanted to go to Africa, but I'm like, where do you go? There's so many countries, like there's so
Right.
many beautiful places. But through some of the activism Ellen mentioned before, through veganism, food justice stuff, there's actually a really great foundation in Uganda, and it's like a vegan social justice nonprofit where they feed people plants and do all these really amazing things. So I actually got to go visit them and see what they're doing. So I really like going places where I can connect with people, whether I meet them on the fly or if it's specifically planned out ahead of time. Because I don't know, it just enriches your experience when you actually know people who live there.
Okay, so bucket list then. 20 countries in the bag. Where are some of the top places that your wanderlust is causing you to dream about next?
It's really weird. I keep hearing about Italy, and Europe is not like on my list to go back to soon. But I just keep hearing about it, and that's how I end up going to places. I keep hearing about it. I keep hearing about it. I'm like, why is everyone saying this? Why do I specifically keep hearing about this? And I end up going there. So I keep hearing about that, and I've wanted to go back to Asia because I did Thailand and I went to China, but I want to do Vietnam and Laos. And I really, really want to go back to Chile and go through South America again, see my host family, kind of like relive some of those memories.
Now that you're a more seasoned traveler, maybe you picked up some more Spanish.
Yeah, now that my host family won't be like, wow, we can't handle this. Hopefully it will be easier on them now. They're like, all right, you're more of an adult. You could speak Spanish. We don't have to worry about you. Yeah, so I think those are some of the places on my list. And I really, really want my own budget travel TV show. And yeah, I'm working on it. So if that happens, when it does happen, I think that I have some really good ideas for TV shows in episodes in Guatemala and Thailand. And like hopefully I get to go back there to those places for that. So when I went to Thailand, I met my friend from Denmark there, and we went to an elephant sanctuary, and we filmed all of the first episode, so I could pitch it to people.
Okay.
And it's just taken me, I'll like get really excited about it, and then I love shooting it, I love filming it, I love hosting it, and then when I go to edit it all together and I have hours and hours of footage, I'm like, oh my God, that's not the job I want. I don't want to put it together. I want someone else to put it together. I want to be like, let's go here, let's do this, like I'll explain this. So that's just taken me a while to get it all together. But that's the idea, right? Is that I have some things to already show.
Wow. I'll be really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be interesting.
So do you think that, because your book it sounds like your book that we're talking about, it does sound like it's mostly written for the United States. of America. Do you think that maybe you would write one for international, since you've gone so many places, so many other countries?
Yeah, I would like to do that, because I think when a lot of people start traveling, sometimes they do it in their home country. I'm thinking like, a lot of people now are doing van trips and stuff like that. With this guide, instead of overwhelming people, I'm like, let's focus on the USA because that's what I really, really know, right? Like I could
Yeah.
get around in, maybe almost any other country, but the USA, like I know these programs, so let's start here. But a lot of what is in the book can be applied to other countries too. Like the programs that I mentioned, a lot of countries have their own similar program or those programs are international. But I really would like to, once I get more countries under my belt, write a budget guide to the world,
Oh.
and other countries. And it's a lot to capture though, because everyone just has their own systems. In that book that you read, there's the tips and then there's stories interwoven. And I
Mhm.
just want to write one book like the book Wild by Cheryl Strayed that's just the bike experience, like the whole thing. So I think
Yes.
that's on my list next to write, and then more guides.
Like a more memoir style.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is actually what I was also thinking, because I love that part of the book. I mean, I like the other parts too, but I really love hearing these stories and experiences. And I was like, it'd be really cool if this section was like expanded. And
Yes. We're on the same brain like wavelengths.
I think so. I think so.
So yeah, it's a travel book, and it's a lot of like bullet pointed tips and internet link resources, et cetera, et cetera. But I still wanted to pull a quote from it. And this
Yeah.
one really jumped out at me, and it might not be as directly seemingly related to the travel, but within the context of the book, I understand why you put it there. And because
Mhm.
it's sort of pertinent to a subject matter that comes up in our episodes a lot, I thought it would be a good one to bring out. So you wrote, I've noticed that in today's society, it's harder for us to ask for what we need. It may stem from a place of not feeling worthy enough, not wanting to inconvenience others, or just the anxiety of asking. One of the many corruptive values that are drilled into our heads in the USA is that we must pull ourselves up from our bootstraps and weather the storm alone. Capitalism has also instilled deep in our bones the idea that we need to be productive at all times, working to be worthy of anything, that getting anything handed to us is a shameful thing, and I disagree. So let's talk a bit more about that, the importance of it, and how coming to that realization and that philosophy has since played into your travel lifestyle, obviously, with the budget and just asking and working your way along and things like that.
Wow. Thanks, Ellen. That I was like, I wrote that quote. That is so good. It's so true because it resonates with me. So thank you for pulling that out of the book and like putting focus on that. I think that obviously, right, we all have different levels of privilege. Like, I'm not disabled and I'm white and middle class. So, we all have these levels of privilege that play into what we have to do and what we can do and things like that. So, I think there is this notion in the USA we're supposed to do everything ourselves and pull ourselves up from our bootstraps. I think a lot of that is like, right, like people who have a lot of money are usually not doing the most work. Like the factory workers are doing the most work. And so instead of this idea of we all have to struggle individually to, do anything or be great or be worthy of anything, I like this model of community care better, right? Like asking for what we need, sharing our needs, sharing our resources when we have them, and then when we don't, receiving those resources. I like that a lot better. And yeah, with capitalism, it's like money is everything. And really like money is your time and your energy. So, for example, with my bike trip, instead of working before I went to save up like a lot of people do, I was exchanging that on the road. I would work, whatever, like at a restaurant or wherever for a meal that day, or I would work, I don't know, doing a random job. Like this one time I turned into this guy's nanny and babysitter and cleaned his house, like on the go when I needed cash for the next bus ticket. So it's a little bit different of a model. Yeah, sometimes there are people who have more resources than the rest of us. And I think that it is okay to say, hey, I'm lacking in this area. Can you share this resource with me? And if people want to, they will. And if they don't want to, they won't. We think like, oh, they have it, so it's theirs, or they deserve it. And I don't have that money, so I don't deserve these things, or whatever that is. It's like, no, it's not always fair like that. And sometimes we need to, use that community care, and sometimes we need to ask for what we need. And doors open up, right? Like, just asking for things that, for someone else may not be that big of a deal, but for you, like, that's huge for you. Like when you're on a bike trip and you really need a ride because your bike broke down. For someone else, they're like, oh yeah, I'm already going this way. It's not really a big deal. Get my car, I drop you off. For me, it's like, that's the whole world. What am I going to do if this is not fixed yet? So that model of community care and asking for what you need, and not everything needs to be based on this like monetary system that's killing us, I think was really cool to learn about firsthand and get to experience. After that and out of the country, I've done a lot of work exchanges, and I've also asked to create positions that weren't there before. So maybe I want to go somewhere, but I could never afford it. Hey, can I teach yoga there? Hey, can I do your social media? Hey, can I whatever? I mean, just asking. Sometimes you're not even taking anything away from someone else. You're just creating a new possibility. So it's been fun to kind of play with that. And I always encourage other people, like if you're on a budget, sometimes you have to create these new opportunities for yourself, and you just have to ask. I mean, my mom always says the worst they can say is no. So that's what I always keep thinking, like, all right, if they don't, and sometimes they say no, but.
And I like how in your book you say that a couple times. You're basically like giving the reader, the traveler, the permission, like just ask. But you're also saying, just remember that the other person has the right to say no, and that's fine too. You just move on from there. I would say more often than not, people fall into this trap outlined in the quote of just feeling like they're not worthy enough and they'll never get to accomplish some big thing they dream of consequently. But the reverse of that sometimes is you have the people that, I don't know, maybe they're like so inflated with privilege or something that they are offended at the very thought someone would even dare to tell them no. And it's like, well, come on, the respect's got to go both ways. And so you ask, they say no, you move on, somebody else comes along, they say yes, well, there you go. I mean, you just pick up from there. And but the importance being in your position, in the traveler's position, is trying and putting it out there so that you actually have the opportunity with your hands out, I guess, to receive something, instead of just assuming nothing's ever going to happen,
Yeah.
Assuming nothing's ever going to happen, I think, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, maybe in a lot of Americans' lifestyles. 80 years old wondering where your life went. It's like, well, you should have gone out and asked,
Yeah, and it starts conversations and connections with people, because it feels good, right? Like when we do something good for someone else, or we like genuinely help someone, it feels good. Like we're like, oh, we did what we were here for the day. So it starts so many connections that if we're just based on this monetary system of like, that's the only time I'm going to have an exchange with someone, that's the only way I'm going to go here or stay here or see this place, then we miss so many opportunities to connect with people that we usually wouldn't connect with. Like, I've just gone to so many places where if I hadn't asked to do this thing in exchange for this thing, this magical adventure would have never happened, and I would have never met these people. And usually we both benefit from it. So it's not this thing of like, you need to give me everything for free just because I'm asking for it. It's like, it's an exchange sometimes, and it's an ebb and flow. Sometimes you give, sometimes you take, but it's like that community coming together, thinking of ways outside of just money, like thinking of barter and exchanges and trades and different things like that.
We ask people to come on the podcast, and that's kind of like, and sometimes we ask people that, we feel like, oh, they're definitely going to say no because we've been doing this a couple years. We're like, oh, but we find it worth it to ask, and they might say yes, or they might say, hit us up later, or, they might not respond, but we asked. So
exactly,
it takes some courage and some,
humility,
humility and some managing of expectations. In the end, I think it's definitely worth it.
That's what I've learned. A lot of people, I had some bad days on my bike trip, and sometimes people would tell me no. this one guy at a farmer's market got really mad at me for asking to do like a work exchange. But I had heard from other travelers, like that's a really good place to ask to do that because that's like a community of like-minded people. And it felt really, really crappy actually because he was just so mean about it. And I'm like, you know what? He's allowed to say no, whatever. Like I'm all upset. And then I was walking down the street and I out of nowhere saw a sign for a raw vegan restaurant. That was like my favorite type of food at the time. In my wildest dreams, I never thought on this bike trip I'd be eating at a raw, like fancy raw vegan restaurant. And on my bike trip, while I have no money, I walk in there and ask to work. And what do you know? I'm eating like a really healthy meal. It's usually really expensive, and I had to pull weeds for them and whatever, do this stuff. But sometimes being told no is okay too, right? Because if I would have worked at that farmer's market, I would have never walked down the street and gone into this place and I met this incredible woman and we still talk and we both felt really inspired after that, and that would have never happened. So I'm like, you know what? It's a yes and a no, and you never know what's going to happen. And you never know, not to get too woo woo, but like what the universe is kind of orchestrating for you if you believe in that.
I think those interpersonal connections, those non-monetary exchanges are definitely underrated, and they're so important. And I've never done anything by myself. I've always had someone help me. I can't say I've done anything in my life and I've got to places just by myself. Someone had to make those boots and bootstraps.
And I think that's how it should be, right? We're like animals, and other animals depend on other animals and depend on nature. Like we do the same thing, but I think in the US we're so focused on, I have to do it by myself. But no one really ever does it by themselves. Like you said, no one really, really, truly ever does.
I'm missing the words right now, but we need other people. There's some sort of ecosystem that we're all kind of enmeshed in, and it's just like, humans didn't survive to this point by themselves.
Yeah.
If we were in a group all the time, you don't hear about the lone human. You hear about the lone human that might have not made it.
Yeah.
They were by themselves. So tell us about your blog and your podcast, and what will people find and learn by following your media?
Oh, wow. They'll learn a lot of things. Some things they probably wish they didn't learn, to be honest. There's a lot that I share there. So my blog, it's based on traveling when you don't have that much money, just to make it more accessible to more people. And then I share like what I learned, what adventures I went on, and then, specific recommendations, like when you go here, go to these places. But it's all very alternative. And at the same time, it's very, obviously it's from a standpoint of anti-speciesism, veganism, treating other animals as persons too. So it's like a lot of, this is where to eat plant-based. This is how to engage ethically with animal tourism. There's a big focus on that. And then it's very body positive. It's queer friendly. So it's more than just travel. It's kind of a social justice take on all these things that travel kind of introduces us to and has us play with throughout our journeys. So there's that on my blog, right? There's the adventures and there's this is what I thought, but then there's like this is how to walk across the US. This is how to bike across the US. So there's a lot of free resources because I found free resources that helped me get across the US, and I want to help other people do the same. So you can read that on the blog. And then on my podcast, it's just really interesting guests that I meet usually on the road. So I have interviewed people who walked across the USA. I met this girl on my bike trip who was younger than me. So she had to be 17 at the time. And she actually biked all the way across the US. I went off like hitchhiking and meeting random people and everything. She like biked the whole thing and continued on traveling after that. So I had her on, and she talks about her experience like hitchhiking around at a young age as a female. And then there's also stories of activism on there too, because travel is not just going outside of the country or going on this huge trip. It's also, I went and did this adventure for the weekend, right? Like I moved out of my comfort zone and I went and did this. That's what travel is to me a lot. So you'll also see a lot of stories of weird activism on there, or protests or demonstration, just to kind of introduce people to other ways of doing activism and combining that with travel.
And your self-growth, I would say, because some of the stuff that I've seen you write is like you're reflecting on something, and maybe it was related directly or loosely to whatever the travel posts were surrounding it, but it'll diverge into something where it caused some self-reflection in you that's clearly illustrating your growth, but also is a helpful nugget that, like, maybe people should think about this thing and question these, beauty standards or whatever else. So that's cool too, that extra personal touch.
Yeah, and sometimes it might be too personal, I feel like, but I'm like, what's too personal? Like, we're all humans sharing this really weird experience. Like, I don't know what's too personal, what's not too personal. So sometimes the lines are blurred between that. But I get a lot from reading other people's, like Ellen makes really great posts like that are personal, and it makes you feel less alone. And sometimes it can help you learn a lesson a little bit more without having to go through all the suffering of learning that lesson. So if I can help other people do that, or I can normalize something that's usually hard for them in their life, then I feel okay with oversharing. So there are things like that too.
I mean, I guess it's just whatever you feel comfortable with.
How does your or how has, even in some of the things you've done that you've mentioned, the vegan activism and animal rights, how's that been incorporated into some of your travel? Was it some instances where, because you were involved in those things, it afforded you a certain trip and access, which it sounds like maybe with like the elephant sanctuary stuff? Or is it some of the things where it's like, because you are engaged in those things, you get somewhere and then you're like, oh, here's where I can plug into this here, or both?
It's been a little of both. At first, it was a lot of like, I'm going to San Francisco. I don't know who I'm going to stay with. I'm going to look at the vegan group on Facebook and just, hey, can I stay with someone? And I stay with them, and they're going to a protest, so I'm going with them. And then I had a lot of fun there, and I met other activists, and then I'm protesting with them or supporting their events whenever I come back or while I'm there. So it's been nice to plug into that community and join and support their efforts while I'm there in person or later online. For example, I went to Sarah Sanctuary in Texas, where they rescue abused animals. A lot of them are used for food. So they pay for my plane ticket there, but then I make videos for them. I work for them while I'm there, like cleaning and taking care of animals and stuff like that. Then you meet other activists there, and then you might join them for something. So it's been a lot of even weird things. Like the first time I had gotten arrested, I was actually traveling. I just happened to be in California, maybe my second time in California, and an activist just knew I was there, who I had met before, and was like, hey, do you want to do this demonstration with us? We need more people. So we went into SeaWorld and caused a scene and dressed up in orca suits and played dead in their pool and made them really mad. And I'm not from California. I was just there on a whim. I'm from the whole other side of the country, but I was able to support them in their demonstration. Yeah, so things like that have happened. It's a great way to plug into communities wherever you go, and it's a great way to learn about what other like grassroots activists are doing, kind of sample out different types of activism. So yeah, it's been a lot of like protesting on the ground, but then also just learning from them, helping where I can, and then we kind of support each other from afar after that.
Keep those connections, because more doors could always open up, right?
Yeah, I never thought I was going to be at SeaWorld doing that. I had no idea that was going to happen, but I just met some incredible people, and it kind of showed me what creative demonstrations can look like. I can carry that home and start that here. So it's really cool just to learn from other people and see what they're doing.
I'm glad you mentioned the Sarah Sanctuary one, because that's a great episode of your podcast. I thought that was really, really cool. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, and the rest of my family is in Texas now, and I was just like, wow, that would be great to go visit them and then go see the sanctuary and everything else. So, but
yes, it's magical. You should.
Everyone should listen to that episode, guys. It's really, really good.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's the thing too, when you plug in with people, it does help if you're budget travel and you're building this community as you go, it does help, right? Because when I went to Sarah Sanctuary, they paid for my plane ticket. So I basically did a work exchange while I was there, right? Because I was working the whole time. They got drone videos and pictures and extra help. I got this new experience of going to stay at their place. No one had to spend a ton of money, and I got my trip paid for, and I just had to do like labor while I was there. So it creates all these really cool connections.
So, what are some of your favorite books you'd recommend pertaining to travel, health, self-care, animal rights, so forth? If someone was just sort of wanting to learn more about these topics.
That is a good question. I started thinking of this earlier. I was like, I knew I forgot to research, like I meant to write a list for this thoroughly. Because there's so many good things. I think that there are a lot of, starting with veganism, there are a lot of different books out there, and it depends on what you're interested in. Because if you're coming into veganism, which is a social justice movement, but if you're coming into it from the health perspective of the diet of plant-based eating, right, there's going to be certain books that you want. But if you come into it from the animal rights perspective, you're going to be interested in something totally different. So I think that it really depends on what people are interested in first. I can't remember the specific titles, but there are multiple books out there wrote from sanctuary point of view of like people who actually rescue, and I think Jean Bauer wrote one and talk about the animal stories. So if you're going into it from this ethical point of view, you're going to have like really strong stories and memories to keep you going and know why you're doing things. Afroism is a really good book that connects race and veganism, which I think is, obviously very important subjects, and there's a lot of interconnectedness between the two subjects. So that highlights that clearly, very clearly. And also there's a ton of free resources online. So I think finding someone that you're really interested in who's kind of leading you into veganism, and then a lot of people are writing books these days, even if it's just an ebook, finding something that resonates with you and then reading that. For all of these things, actually, which is really weird, The Fifth Sacred Thing is a fictional story that takes place. Yeah, like I see Jennifer, like, yeah.
One of my favorite books.
My favorite. I think
book.
it is my favorite book, hands down. Like, shows us what society could be like.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's an adventure, right? So it's connected with travel, and then it's also connected with self-care, like you said, like these people trying to survive. And yeah, it talks about the ethics of how we live and what we eat and what we do and all these things. So that's like my all-time favorite book, I think.
By Starhawk.
Yes, by
And
Starhawk. It's
like a post-apocalyptic. It's got all. I mean, it's just.
It covers so much.
So much.
It's so layered that I was just like, my mind was blown after that book.
I love how they structure the society there in San Francisco, and all of the religions have their own space, and then whatever you want to do as a job, you can learn to do it. Mm-hmm. Or they have a UBI, they have a universal basic income. I mean, it's just great. It's like you can work if you want, you get a stipend. If you don't work, right now.
And you can do work exchange, like what we were talking about. Like that would be totally normal.
It's really good.
Post-apocalyptic, but with the hopeful future instead of the gritty, dirty, dark things that culture and media seems to like to obsess over more currently.
It's got both.
It literally has both.
Got both.
It's like utopic and apocalyptic at the same time. It's like, how did you do that?
It's romantic. Got some sexy scenes.
Yes, she's a good writer. She also has written books on like the Sacred Spiral I have, which is more on magic, like earth magic. And so yeah, I recommend her in general because that's like part of that self-healing, learning about yourself, learning how to take care of yourself in the earth. She's really good for that. And one more book that came to mind too is called The Heartbeat of Trees. I forget how to pronounce the author's name. He's German, but it talks about like the inner life of trees. It's science-based, but it's talking about like how trees can actually hear sounds, how they can see. And it completely changed my view and my outlook and my connection and my interaction with nature. So it changes the way that you move through the world. It changes the way that I travel. It changes the way that I consume. So that was like a book that also just blew my mind. Yeah, Starhawk and The Heartbeat of Trees are like two must reads.
And I will put links to all of these so everyone can find them.
Yeah, the last
yeah.
one actually I would say is I used a lot of the quotes from the book. Oh my gosh, The Alchemist. I don't know if you both have read that, but I used a lot of quotes from that in my book because I read that book before I started traveling across the USA. And although I can't remember the storyline now, the main thing that stuck with me was asking for what you need and imagining what you want to happen before you actually get there, imagining like your wildest dreams and kind of feeling into that. And so I took a lot of that with me on my bike trip. And like I said, I can't remember the full storyline now, but it's sat with me all these years. So that's a good one too.
Along your journeys, have there been folks that really inspired and supported you that stand out in particular? Like, do you have anyone that you would consider kind of became a mentor of some sort along your travels?
Yeah, the first person actually that I thought of, his name's Brother Tom. He's 70 years old, I think. I met him in California. I was on my bike trip. I was at a church sleeping at night, and then this guy asked me if I wanted to take a ride. He had to pick up kids and drop them off at church camp. He's like, I'll just take you down the coast. You can have a free ride. And I was like, why not? And so he didn't really give me a heads up. He kind of just kicked me out of the car, and it was getting dark, and I didn't really know where I was. Long story short, I just like heard a voice that's like, just go into the supermarket. It'll be okay. And I was like, that's weird, but okay. Before I even got in the door, I met all these different people, and Brother Tom was with them. And again, like 70-year-old dude in California. And I ended up staying with him for over a week. He immediately invited me to stay. He taught me how to hitchhike. He's like a true hippie from back in the day. And he went vegan after I met him. And he just had I don't know, his energy is so loving and so giving and so adventurous and wild at the same time. And he stays so true to himself, and he doesn't do it because other people are watching. He's just like that. I think he was a mentor in different ways because we still write like handwritten letters to each other every month. And so he doesn't try to be, but he is. And I think that was like an unexpected mentor that kind of popped up for me. I don't have a lot of like specific ones in the travel world because I connect with a lot of other travelers and maybe travel bloggers and stuff like that. But it feels like there's always something a little off for me. Someone's promoting animal tourism or eating animals. There always seems to be like a part missing for me of me being able to like really follow everything that they're saying and like be super connected to that. So I think it's more been random people that I have met that I'm like, wow.
Just
and authors
here, take a little nugget there from the totality of the experience.
Yeah. So I'd say just everyone in little ways have kind of been my mentors, just taking the best of everyone and trying to practice that.
I'd like to just talk a minute about travel in general. I was wondering, in your experience, what does it mean to travel, and what does the act of travel do? And I guess, how does it change a person to travel or not change a person to travel?
Yeah. So first thing that comes to mind actually about not changing a person to travel, I think that, we see pictures of people traveling and we hear about these incredible adventures and we think, oh my gosh, travel will change me completely. And in some ways it will. Like your whole world has changed. You've expanded your mind. You can't come back to what it was before. You've seen all these things. You've experienced all these things. But at the same time, like at your core, you're still the same person. What is travel? I think it's just going out of our comfort zone. Like traveling is even going on a hike on the weekend to a new place you haven't been to before, right? Just that adventure of of traveling, going somewhere else, moving to a new place you haven't been to before, is travel for me. And so, yeah, once you're in a new place, like you're forever changed. Every second you're forever changed. Just other people and interacting with the earth, it changes you in some way. But, people seem to think that once you travel, like, you won't be depressed anymore. All your problems will be solved. You'll know what you're here on this earth to do. All these big things. And it's like, no, you're still there. You take those things with you. You might have some space away from them to reflect on them and see what changes you want to make in your life, and you're growing and expanding. But at the end of the day, you're still you, just in a new place. So I guess the act of travel is just taking yourself somewhere new and allowing that to incorporate, into your life, whatever changes has happened. But that is one myth about travel that I like to dispel. Because at the end of the day, you're just you in a new place. So you change, and at the same time, you don't change. You're still the same person.
It's interesting how you might not know what does change until you kind of come in a full circle effect. Because I think about how I, grew up in a real small southern town and moved out of state to follow love, ended up there a lot longer than I ever intended or thought I would, the layover of the Midwest. Then from there, we had traveled around the country for 9 months just living out of our car. And we were like, surely along this journey, somewhere will jump out at us and speak to us and be like, this is where you should really end up, And yeah, there were plenty of places that we really liked and enjoyed. And we were like, I could see myself being here. But nothing was like, there wasn't like, I don't know, some part of me imagined like this bell would ring and the heavens would open up. I don't know. Like this is, and there wasn't that. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, it is what you make of it or whatever. But we sort of, just by way of running out of money, had to land back in my hometown at my parents' place. And it was like, seriously, I was trying to get away from here. And then we ended up back in the Midwest, which we were really having, trying to get away from there. And we got stuck there for life circumstances for a little while longer. But the funny thing is right before we had left to go travel around the country, I had, not even with any serious intention, I had torn this image out of the back of a health magazine that was just this really pretty flowery meadow and this woman standing in it like this. And it had this quote on it that said something about, when you set out on life's journey, you may arrive back where you started and see it with fresh eyes or something like that. I had tucked that into a notebook and had completely, that traveled all around with us. There. And then here we are in our second layover in the Midwest and not so happy about it. And I had traveled back home to North Carolina to do this natural building workshop. And I was there one day and I was just like, wait a minute. I was thinking about all the stuff that was around me, the nature that I was in, the thing that I was immersed in. And I was like, all this stuff that I was like, I'll go find it out there. It was in my own backyard the whole time, That was and within a couple of days, when I was back home in the Midwest again, preparing for whatever life's next steps would be after that awakening kind of experience, I was organizing some stuff and found that notebook and found that paper. I was like, now it makes sense.
That's what happened.
Over a decade's worth of experience to have that snap back in your face. The important thing then is seeking the experiences so that you can have those aha moments, because otherwise, they're not just gonna necessarily hit you as readily if you're just sitting around all the time waiting for life to happen.
I love that you ripped that out and then you took it with you everywhere, and then you literally did what it said, and then you're like, oh yeah,
surprise.
Yeah.
I guess I have that same, I think I have it folded up now, stuck in my desk somewhere, because I was like, well, it journeyed with me through all of that and the aha moment, so I guess it deserves a little keepsake nook.
It deserves to be kept, for sure.
There's something that happens when you travel through space, you sort of go somewhere else physically. It's hard to put your finger on it, but it's important to do that every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah, just to shake things up and move the energy around. And you're still you no matter what, but how are you going to integrate what you learned into your life when you come back? Or it integrates itself sometimes, right? Like
Mhm.
you don't even notice it, like Ellen said, until you look at the paper and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what just happened. But yeah, it's just, it's wild. It is hard to explain if you haven't done it before, just how much you learn, even in a short period of time.
I would like for my husband and I to go take a trip because he's never seen the desert. I was also very fortunate to take like that very cheesy family road trip,
Hmm.
and we did 2 months in the back of a station wagon, and we went all the way around. And but I got to see, Badlands, and we did the national parks. We did all that stuff. But I'm
Yes.
like, I would love for him to, and I think he wants to go, like, just to see this different landscape. It's just
Hmm.
so cool. And he's
Hmm.
never been on a plane either. One day we'll get him on a plane, but
Yes. Yeah, and some things, like I feel like some people have never been to a desert before, like you said, and they get there and they're like, this is my calling. I am obsessed with the desert. I am in love with it. I need to be here. I need to study it, maybe like work related or live there or something. But there's just like something out there and you just haven't gotten to it yet. And you never know what it's going to be. But then you happen upon it and you're like, I couldn't imagine my life had I not done this.
well, I hope not, because I really want to stay here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe he'll just be like
If
Ellen
he
in real
started to
life.
fall in love with the desert, just like when he's asleep, play like the sounds of rain and be like, "Don't
Yes.
you miss the temperate rain?"
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't really like the heat,
So no worries.
so probably no worries. We might end up in the Arctic somewhere, though. Like
Yeah.
Alaska. No, I doubt it, but
That's good.
So, Calen, what inspires you most about the natural world? We always like to ask our guests that as it ties into our theme.
Probably how unruly it is. Like the trees are doing what they want. The other animals that we share this planet with are doing what they want. They're not like asking for permission. They're not like, oh, how much money do you have? Oh, how tall? You know what I mean? Like, look at they're just not doing these things that I feel like we as humans have set up these rules for ourselves. We've created these boxes, or other people have created these boxes. Now we're all expected to fit into them, and if we don't, you're like punished for it. And the natural world, they're just there. Like I always think of, body things too, having experienced different body issues and disordered eating and stuff like that. I never really realized it until my partner kind of pointed out to me, but like we love curves in nature. We love when trees like twist and are curvy and have all these different shapes and sizes. Like we adore that in nature, and then we punish humans for that. And I just think we forget that like we are nature. We're the same thing. So I love how nature is just doing what they're doing, and they're not apologizing for it. Like it's just there. And I think that the biggest thing for us is learning, like, how do we get back to that too? All these things we appreciate
Good
in
choice of words
nature.
too. Get back
Yeah.
to it. Get
Yes.
back to it. Hello, humans.
Hello.
Welcome to your once and future life.
Yes. Because we're there. We're like in nature, right? We have all we've ever had is nature. Everything we have is built from it. So yeah, how do we get back to like just being a part of nature and not apologizing for that, and kind of breaking down all these things that we created that the natural world is just doing and being, I guess.
yeah, getting back to being more human,
Hmm.
and that would be good. I think
That would
people.
be very good. Yeah, it's like going back home. Like I feel like we all kind of feel homesick for something, or like people don't feel very fulfilled all the time. Like whether it's 9 to 5 jobs or your house, or like people are focused on like cars and status and things like that, which is human. Like I think about the same things. I think like the most important thing is nature, and so if we could just get back to that and just be humans in nature, I think everyone would be so much happier. Yeah. It's the weekend. We don't have to be here
You don't have to
anymore.
be here. Yeah, and then the rest of the week is like schlep.
Yeah. And
You're
what,
like, this.
everyone runs to go on hikes on the weekend. You know, they sit outside on their porches. Like, people want to go to nature. I'm just like, yes, let's get there. Let's do it.
Like outside for lunch as much as I can.
Yeah.
Sunny, rainy, whatever. I mean, at some point it gets too cold, but
Yeah. I was going to say, I have a limit.
I will. Yeah. But I will definitely be like, okay, it stopped raining. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
out now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that question. That was a really good question.
Do you have anything exciting that is upcoming that you wish to share and promote with our listeners? Trips you're
Oh.
taking, podcast interviews you're doing, writing projects, and you've already mentioned the travel show, but
Yes. So, travel show, yes. I'm working on editing that footage that I told you about from Thailand. And then I don't know what will happen. I've already kind of talked to some people. It's in the works a little bit, but I really have to solidify it. So that's at the top of my list to do. I know this won't be published yet. I don't think by then, but on Thursday I'm giving a talk through the Nomadic Network on how to travel on a budget. I'll be telling the full bike story. And so listeners can go back and email the Nomadic Network. It's all on a sliding scale. So if you want that talk, you could pay $5, you could pay $10, $0. And I think that you're able to rewatch that talk. So if anyone's interested in that and getting a bunch of free information on how to travel on a budget, that's this Thursday. And if you miss it, then you can always go back and ask them for the recording. And what else? Yeah, I have some podcast guests that I met in Guatemala that I'm now going to do interviews with via Skype. So those will be some interesting people coming onto my podcast, hopefully here in the near future. One of the stories was someone who was undocumented, came into the US, and it's his whole story of what it was like to be an undocumented person in the US, why he came here. He ended up being incarcerated, and you know, he like had to walk through the desert 10 days to get here and risk everything just to try to get here. He's going to be telling his story. So again, it's that travel but also like social justice at the same time. So yeah, I think that's about it. I always share on my blog, if you sign up for my email list, when a new podcast comes out, a new article, and anything exciting that might be happening will be shared there.
You already have your next trip planned?
I don't actually. I know that every year I'm gonna take 2 months off to go backpack and travel, like no matter what. I don't. I usually always have the next trip planned, but for this time I'm like, no, I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm sure I will plan something quickly.
it was Italy, right?
Yeah, there's Italy again.
Well, awesome. Well, we'll be looking forward to hearing about that and all of your projects and everything. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming and chatting with us. You can find the Art of Unruly Travel on a budget. Yes, I'll put a link.
Yay!
Yay! I believe it's
on my website. It's sold on a sliding scale. I can't remember what the lowest is and what the highest is, but people can go on and order the printed copy and I can send it to you. You can download the ebook, and if you can't afford the rates that are on there, just email me and we'll work it out.
Awesome.
And if you're in the Western North Carolina, Asheville area, you can pick up a physical copy at local stores such as Middle Path Nutrition and Wellness Center. Where else you're in? Firestorm Books and Cafe. You're in the Second Gear.
Black Mountain Sports, I think it's called. And I'm about to be in Malaprops.
Nice.
Yeah. I just got to physically take the books there, and then I'll be there.
And then just, hobnob with them a little bit to get them to schedule you to do a book talk there. Because I hear they usually are pretty well attended. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be pretty awesome.
They have a YouTube channel too.
Oh.
Yes. Malaprop started that during the pandemic because they were they were closed and they couldn't do their talks.
Oh,
So that might be
thank you
something
for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So maybe the exciting events will be book talks coming up.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
And I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Thank you very much. And you can listen to us on Anchor, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We are on YouTube. You can watch us, see our smiling faces. Have a Facebook group, and we are on Instagram, and all those links will be below. If you'd like to support us, you can also go to our Anchor page to donate and leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Okay, so say woohoo!
Every little bit helps.
Yes. And it's something you can do for free to support people.
Yes, and it's very helpful. Anyway, but yeah, I think it's very important to have an option that is non-monetary, so that people, because not everyone can, give $5 or give $1. So,
But you can still engage.
you can still engage, exactly.
You can leave a review. You could share your favorite episode with someone.
Right, and we will have a Patreon at some point, so there's that too, eventually.
Yes, and thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, thank you, Calen.
I know you've had some amazing guests on here that have talked about really interesting, important things too, that I feel like, we need more free resources on. So thank you for being that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we'll talk to you next time. Okay, bye.
See ya.